The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night. The last employee had left the building almost 2 hours ago. The security guard at the front desk was half asleep, watching something on his phone with the volume turned low. And somewhere on the 39th floor of Sterling Tower, a man in a faded blue uniform was pushing a mop across the marble floor. His name was Raymond, and he had been cleaning this building for nearly 4 years. Every night was the same. He would clock in at 7, start from the top floor, and work his way down. He cleaned the bathrooms, emptied the trash cans, wiped down the desks, and vacuumed the carpets. By the time he finished, the sun would be coming up, and he would take the subway back to his small apartment in Brooklyn. Nobody at Sterling Industries knew anything about him. To them, he was just the night janitor, the invisible man who made sure their offices were spotless every morning. They never said hello. They never asked how he was doing. Most of them did not even know his name. And honestly, Raymond preferred it that way. But Raymond had a secret that he kept hidden from everyone in that building. A secret that came alive only after midnight, when every floor was empty and every light was dimmed. On the 40th floor, there was an executive lounge. It was a fancy room with leather couches, a small bar, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Manhattan skyline. But the thing that mattered most to Raymond was sitting in the corner of that room. A beautiful black grand piano, a Steinway, worth more than he would make in 10 years of pushing that mop dot every night. After he finished cleaning the 40th floor, Raymond would sit down at that piano. He would close his eyes, take a deep breath, and place his fingers on the keys. And then he would play. He played Chopin. He played Beethoven. He played Debussy and Liszt and Rachmaninoff. He played pieces so beautiful and so complex the most professional pianists would struggle to perform them. And he played them perfectly, with a kind of emotion that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside his soul. If anyone had walked into that room and seen him, they would not have believed their eyes. How could a janitor, a man who spent his nights scrubbing toilets and mopping floors, play the piano like that? It did not make sense. It was like finding out that the quiet old man who sold newspapers on the corner was actually a retired brain surgeon. But there was a reason Raymond could play like that. A reason that he never talked about. A reason that still caused him pain every time he thought about it. 20 years ago, Raymond was not a janitor. He was a student at one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. He had earned a full scholarship based on his talent alone. His professors said he was a once-in-a-generation pianist. They said he had the potential to perform at Carnegie Hall, to travel the world, to make history. His mother had cried when he got accepted. She was a single mom who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. She had saved for years to buy him his first keyboard when he was 7 years old. It was a cheap little thing, with keys that stuck and speakers that crackled. But to Raymond, it was the most precious gift he had ever received. He practiced on that keyboard every single day. Before school, after school, late into the night. His fingers would hurt so bad that he could barely hold a pencil the next morning. But he never stopped, because every time he played, he felt like he was flying, like nothing else in the world mattered, like all the problems and struggles of his life just disappeared. His mother would sit in the kitchen and listen to him play. She never complained about the noise, even when he practiced the same piece over and over again for hours. She would just smile and say, "That's my boy. That's my little Mozart." By the time he was 18, Raymond had won every piano competition in the state. Talent scouts were calling. Music schools were offering scholarships. His future was bright and golden and full of promise. And then, in one terrible moment, everything changed. It was a rainy night in November. Raymond was 22 years old, in his final year at the music school. He was supposed to perform his senior recital in 2 weeks, the biggest performance of his life. His mother was driving up from Philadelphia to see him practice. She never made it. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car on the passenger side. She died before the ambulance could reach her. Raymond got the call at 11:30 at night. He remembered every detail of that moment. The sound of his phone ringing, the voice of the police officer on the other end, the way his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the floor of his dorm room. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. He tried to keep going. He tried to focus on his music. But every time he sat down at the piano, he heard his mother's voice in his head. "That's my boy. That's my little Mozart." And he would break down crying, unable to play a single note. He missed his senior recital. He failed his final exams. The scholarship was taken away. And just like that, his dream was over. The years after that were hard. Really hard. Raymond worked odd jobs just to survive. He washed dishes at restaurants. He drove delivery trucks. He stocked shelves at grocery stores. He did whatever he could to pay the rent and keep himself fed. He stopped playing piano completely. For almost 15 years, he did not touch a single key. It hurt too much. Every note reminded him of his mother. Every melody brought back memories he was trying to forget. But then, 4 years ago, something changed. Raymond got the job at Sterling Industries. It was just another cleaning job, nothing special. But on his first night, when he was mopping the floor of the executive lounge, he saw the piano. That beautiful black Steinway sitting in the corner, gleaming under the dim lights. He tried to ignore it. He really did. He finished his cleaning and moved on to the next floor. But the image of that piano stayed in his mind. It haunted him. It called to him. A week later, he gave in. It was past midnight. The building was empty. Raymond walked into the executive lounge, sat down at the piano, and placed his fingers on the keys. His hands were shaking. He had not played in 15 years. He was not even sure he remembered how. But then he started to play. And it all came back. The music flowed out of him like water from a broken dam. All the pain, all the grief, all the years of silence. It all poured out through his fingers and into the keys. He played for 2 hours straight. When he finally stopped, there were tears running down his face. But for the first time in 15 years, they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Tears of healing. Tears of coming home. From that night on, Raymond played every single night. It became his ritual, his therapy, his reason for getting through another day. The piano was his secret friend, his silent companion in the darkness. He never told anyone about it. He never played when others were around. As far as the world knew, he was just a janitor. Just another invisible man pushing a mop through empty hallways. But what Raymond did not know was that his secret was about to be discovered. And the person who would discover it was about to change his life forever. On the top floor of Sterling Tower, in a corner office that overlooked the entire city, there was a woman who had everything. Money, power, respect, a face that appeared on the covers of business magazines. A name that made people nervous when they heard it. Her name was Diana Sterling. And she was the CEO of Sterling Industries. At 34 years old. Diana was one of the most powerful women in New York. She ran a company worth billions of dollars. She made decisions that affected thousands of employees. She sat in boardrooms with men twice her age and made them sweat with a single look. People called her the Ice Queen. They said she had no heart. They said she cared about nothing but profit and power. They whispered about her in the hallways, wondering if she had ever smiled in her entire life. But those people did not know Diana. Not really. They only knew the mask she wore, the armor she had built around herself to survive in a world that wanted to see her fail. The truth was, Diana had not always been this way. Once upon a time, she was a different person, a softer person, a girl who laughed easily and loved deeply and believed that the world was full of good things. But that girl had died a long time ago. She died the same year Diana turned 16, when her mother lost her battle with cancer. Diana's mother was a piano teacher. She gave lessons to children in the neighborhood for $20 an hour. She was not rich. She was not famous. But she had a gift for music that Diana had never seen in anyone else. When her mother played the piano, it was like watching magic happen. The notes seemed to float in the air, wrapping around you like a warm blanket. Diana's favorite memory was sitting next to her mother on the piano bench, watching her fingers dance across the keys. Her mother would play Chopin, always Chopin. She said Chopin understood sadness better than any other composer. She said his music could make you cry and heal you at the same time. There was one piece in particular that Diana loved. Chopin's Ballade No. 1. Her mother would play it every Sunday evening, after dinner, when the house was quiet and the light was golden. Diana would close her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling safe and loved and completely at peace. When her mother got sick, the music stopped. The piano sat untouched in the living room, gathering dust. Diana would walk past it every day, unable to look at it without feeling her heart break. After her mother passed away, Diana's father sold the piano. He said it was too painful to keep. Diana never forgave him for that. It felt like he had erased the last piece of her mother from their home. From that day on, Diana built walls around her heart. She threw herself into her studies. She graduated top of her class. She got her MBA from Harvard. She climbed the corporate ladder with a ruthlessness that scared even her competitors. When her father died 5 years ago, she took over Sterling Industries. She was 29 years old, and suddenly she was responsible for a company that her great-grandfather had built from nothing. The board members did not think she could do it. They saw a young woman with no experience, and they expected her to fail. Some of them even tried to push her out, but Diana proved them all wrong. She worked 18-hour days. She made tough decisions that no one else had the courage to make. She turned a struggling company into a thriving empire. And in the process, she lost herself. Now, at 34, Diana had everything she had ever wanted. And yet, she felt emptier than ever. She had no real friends. She had no time for hobbies or vacations or anything that normal people enjoyed. Her life was just meetings and spreadsheets and conference calls that never seemed to end. She was engaged to a man named Bradley Whitmore. He came from old money, the kind of family that had summer homes and private jets and last names that opened doors. On paper, he was the perfect match. Handsome, wealthy, well-connected. But Diana did not love him. She was not even sure she liked him most of the time. He was arrogant and shallow and cared more about appearances than anything real. Their engagement was not a love story. It was a business arrangement. Two powerful families joining forces. Diana told herself that love was not important. Love was for dreamers and fools. She had watched her father fall apart after her mother died. She had seen what love could do to a person. She never wanted to be that vulnerable, so she kept her walls up. She kept her heart frozen. And she moved through life like a ghost in an expensive suit. But then, one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday in October. Diana had been in the office until almost midnight, dealing with a crisis that had exploded during the afternoon. One of their biggest clients was threatening to walk away. The board was panicking. Everyone was looking to her to fix it. By the time the situation was under control, Diana was exhausted. Her head was pounding. Her eyes burned from staring at her computer screen. She needed to go home and sleep, but she could not make herself move. Instead, she walked to the executive lounge on the 40th floor. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The office was completely silent. Everyone had gone home hours ago. And then she heard it. Music. Faint at first, like a whisper, but unmistakable. Piano music, floating through the empty hallways. Diana froze. Who could possibly be playing piano at this hour? The building was supposed to be empty. Security had not mentioned anyone staying late. She followed the sound, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The music grew louder as she walked. And as she got closer, she recognized the piece. Chopin, Ballade No. 1, her mother's favorite. Diana's breath caught in her throat. She had not heard this piece in almost 20 years. Not since her mother died. She had avoided it deliberately, changing the radio station whenever it came on, leaving concerts if it appeared on the program. It hurt too much to hear it, but now, standing in the dark hallway of her own building, she could not walk away. The music pulled her forward like a hand, reaching out from the past. She reached the doorway of the executive lounge and stopped. What she saw made no sense. The janitor. The night janitor, the man she had passed 100 times without ever really seeing him, was sitting at the grand piano. His eyes were closed. His face was peaceful, and his fingers were moving across the keys with a skill and emotion that Diana had only ever seen in one other person. Her mother. Diana stood there, hidden in the shadows, unable to move. The music washed over her, breaking through walls she had spent 20 years building. Memories flooded back. Her mother's smile, the smell of her perfume, the feeling of sitting beside her on that old piano bench, safe and loved and whole. Tears began to fall down Diana's cheeks. She could not stop them. She did not even try. The janitor played the final notes of the piece, and the silence that followed was almost unbearable. Diana watched as he sat there for a moment, his hands still resting on the keys, his shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. Then, before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. The janitor's eyes flew open. He jumped up from the bench so fast that he nearly knocked it over. His face went pale with fear. "I am so sorry," he stammered. "I know I should not be here. Please, I need this job. I will never do it again, I promise. Please do not fire me." But Diana did not say anything about firing him. She did not say anything about rules or trespassing or proper behavior. Instead, she asked a question that surprised them both. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The janitor stared at her, confusion replacing the fear in his eyes. He clearly had not expected that question. He had expected anger. He had expected punishment. He had not expected the most powerful woman in the building to be standing there with tears on her face, looking at him like he had just performed a miracle. "I studied music," he said quietly, "a long time ago, before life got in the way." Diana nodded slowly. She understood that answer better than he could possibly know. "That piece," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chopin, Ballade No. 1. Why that one?" The janitor was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old sadness. "It was my mother's favorite," he said. "She passed away many years ago. When I play it, I feel like she is still with me." Diana felt something crack inside her chest, something she had kept locked away for 2 decades. "Mine too," she whispered. "It was my mother's favorite too." They stood there in the darkness, two strangers connected by music and grief and the ghosts of mothers they had both loved and lost. Neither of them knew what to say next. Neither of them understood what was happening, but something had shifted. Something had changed, and neither of their lives would ever be the same again. After that night in the executive lounge, something changed between Diana and Raymond. It was small at first. A nod in the hallway, A brief smile when their paths crossed. Little acknowledgments that said, "I see you. I remember." Diana found herself staying late more often. She told herself it was because of work. There was always more work to do. But the truth was, she wanted to hear him play. She would sit in her office with the door cracked open, listening to the faint sound of piano music drifting up from the floor below. It became the only peaceful moment in her chaotic days. She never interrupted him again. She never went down to the lounge to watch. It felt too personal, too intimate, like she would be intruding on something sacred. So she just listened from a distance, letting the music heal parts of her that she had forgotten were broken. Raymond noticed the change too. He noticed that Diana no longer looked through him like he was invisible. When she passed him in the hallway, she would meet his eyes. Sometimes she would even say good evening. It was such a small thing, but to Raymond, it meant everything. For the first time in years, someone at Sterling Industries saw him as a human being, but their quiet connection did not go unnoticed. Bradley Whitmore, Diana's fiancé, had started to pick up on things. He noticed that Diana was staying at the office later than usual. He noticed that she seemed distracted when they were together. He noticed that something had shifted in her, though he could not figure out what. Bradley was not the kind of man who liked mysteries. He was the kind of man who liked control. He liked knowing exactly what was happening and exactly who was involved. And when he did not have that control, he got angry. One evening, Bradley showed up at Sterling Tower unannounced. He wanted to surprise Diana and take her to dinner at some fancy restaurant where he had reserved a private table. But when he got to her office, she was not there. He wandered through the building, growing more irritated by the minute. And then he heard it. Music. Piano music. Coming from somewhere on the 40th floor. Bradley followed the sound to the executive lounge. He pushed open the door and saw a man in a janitor's uniform sitting at the grand piano, playing like his life depended on it. Bradley watched for a moment, his lip curling in disgust. A janitor. A cleaning man. Touching a piano that was worth more than this guy probably made in 5 years. It was absurd. It was offensive. He pulled out his phone and recorded a short video. Then he turned and walked away, a plan already forming in his mind. 2 weeks later, Sterling Industries held its annual charity gala. It was the biggest event of the year. Hundreds of guests filled the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel in Manhattan. There were politicians and celebrities and business leaders from around the world. Everyone who was anyone was there. Diana stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a practiced smile. She wore a silver gown that sparkled under the chandeliers. Her hair was pulled back elegantly. She looked every bit the powerful CEO that the world expected her to be. But inside, she felt hollow. These events exhausted her. All the fake smiles and empty conversations. All the people who only cared about what she could do for them. She wanted to be anywhere else. Bradley stood beside her, his arm wrapped around her waist like she was a possession. He was in his element, laughing loudly and shaking hands with important people. He loved these events. He loved being seen. Raymond was there too, but not as a guest. The company had hired extra staff for the evening, and he had been assigned to work the event. He wore a white server's jacket and carried trays of champagne glasses through the crowd. Nobody looked at him twice. He was invisible again, just another face in the background. But Raymond did not mind. He actually preferred it this way. He could move through the room unnoticed, observing the glittering world that existed so far above his own. At some point during the evening, Raymond passed close to where Diana was standing. Their eyes met for just a second. Diana gave him a tiny nod, almost imperceptible. Raymond felt warmth spread through his chest. Even here, surrounded by hundreds of strangers, she still saw him. But Bradley saw it too. His eyes narrowed as he watched the exchange. He looked at Diana, then at the server who was already disappearing into the crowd. Something clicked in his mind. The late nights. The distraction. The piano music. Bradley excused himself and made his way across the room. He grabbed Raymond by the arm, stopping him mid-stride. "You," Bradley said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are the piano player, are you not? The janitor who thinks he is some kind of artist?" Raymond's face went pale. He tried to pull his arm free, but Bradley's grip was too strong. "I do not know what you're talking about, sir," Raymond said quietly. "Do not lie to me." Bradley's voice was getting louder now. People nearby were starting to turn and look. "I saw you. I have a video of you playing the piano in the executive lounge, touching things that do not belong to you." The crowd around them grew silent. Diana pushed through the guests, her heart pounding. "Bradley, what are you doing?" she demanded. Bradley turned to her with a cruel smile. "I'm just having a little fun, darling. I am just having a little fun, darling. Did you know we have a musical genius on the cleaning staff? Apparently, he's been sneaking into the executive lounge every night to play piano. Can you imagine?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Raymond stood frozen, his face burning with humiliation. He wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "Perhaps he can entertain us tonight," Bradley continued, his voice booming across the ballroom. "What do you say? Should we ask the janitor to give us a little concert?" More laughter. Some of the guests were pulling out their phones, recording the scene. Diana felt sick. She looked at Raymond and saw the pain in his eyes. She looked at Bradley and saw the cruelty in his smile. And something inside her snapped. "That is enough, Bradley," she said, her voice cold and hard. Bradley raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on. I am just having a bit of fun. Unless, wait." His smile turned vicious. "Unless there is something going on here that I should know about. Is that why you have been staying late at the office? For the janitor?" Gasps echoed through the crowd. Diana's face flushed red. "You are being ridiculous," she said. "Am I?" Bradley stepped closer to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You have been different lately, distant, and now I find out you have been spending your nights listening to this nobody play piano. What am I supposed to think?" Diana glared at him. "You are supposed to trust me, but clearly that is too much to ask." Bradley laughed bitterly. Then he turned back to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. "You know what? Let us make this interesting." His voice carried across the entire ballroom. "The janitor here thinks he is some kind of concert pianist. So let us put him to the test. We have a piano right there on the stage. If he can play Chopin better than the professional we hired tonight, then maybe he deserves a little respect." The crowd murmured with excitement. This was better than any entertainment they had expected. Bradley turned to Diana, his eyes gleaming with malice. "And if he can play Chopin's Ballade No. 4 perfectly, without a single mistake, then you should marry him instead of me." The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Diana, waiting for her response. Diana's mind was racing. She knew what Bradley was doing. He was trying to humiliate her. He was trying to put her in an impossible position in front of the most powerful people in the city. But Diana Sterling did not back down from anyone. Not from board members who doubted her. Not from competitors who tried to destroy her. And certainly not from a spoiled man who thought he could control her. She looked at Raymond, standing there in his service jacket, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. She thought about his music, the way it made her feel, the way it had broken through walls she had spent 20 years building. Then she looked back at Bradley. "Fine," she said, her voice clear and steady. "If he can play the Ballade No. 4 perfectly, I will call off our engagement tonight." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Bradley's smile faltered for just a second. He had not expected her to actually accept. Diana turned to Raymond. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. "You do not have to do this," she said softly, so only he could hear. "You can walk away right now. I will handle Bradley." Raymond looked at her for a long moment. He thought about all the years he had spent hiding. All the years he had kept his music locked away like a shameful secret. All the years he had let fear control his life. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. He took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "Where is the piano?" he asked. The crowd parted as Raymond walked toward the stage. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The Ballade No. 4 was one of the most difficult pieces Chopin had ever written. 12 minutes of technical complexity and emotional depth. Professional pianists practiced for years to master it, and Raymond had not performed in front of an audience in over 15 years. But as he climbed the steps to the stage and sat down at the grand piano, something strange happened. The fear began to fade. The noise of the crowd began to disappear. All that remained was the piano in front of him and the music inside his heart. He closed his eyes and placed his fingers on the keys. And then he began to play. The ballroom was completely silent. 300 people stood frozen, champagne glasses in hand, eyes fixed on the man in the server's jacket sitting at the grand piano on the stage. Raymond could feel them watching. He could feel their doubt, their amusement, their expectation that he would fail. To them, this was entertainment, a joke, a janitor pretending to be something he was not. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. For a moment, the fear came rushing back. What was he doing? He had not performed in front of an audience in 15 years. He had no business being up here. He was going to humiliate himself in front of the most powerful people in New York City. But then he thought about his mother. He remembered the way she used to sit beside him when he practiced, the way she would close her eyes and smile when he played something beautiful, the way she believed in him, even when no one else did. "You have a gift," she used to tell him. "Do not ever let anyone make you ashamed of it." Raymond took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, and he let everything else fall away. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 4 floated into the silence. Like a whisper, the piece began softly, gently, like a conversation between old friends. Raymond's fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness that seemed impossible for hands that had spent years pushing mops and scrubbing floors. Each note was precise, delicate, full of meaning. In the crowd, a few people exchanged surprised glances. This was not what they had expected. This was not the fumbling amateur they had been waiting to laugh at. This was something else entirely. Diana stood near the front of the room, her heart pounding. She recognized the piece immediately. The Ballade No. 4 was considered by many to be Chopin's greatest work. It was also one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. Even professional concert pianists approached it with caution. But Raymond played it like he had been born to play it. The music grew more complex as the piece progressed. The gentle opening gave way to passages of stunning technical difficulty. Raymond's hands flew across the keyboard, executing runs and arpeggios that would have made a conservatory professor weep. But it was not just the technique that was remarkable. It was the emotion. Raymond was not just playing notes. He was telling a story of loss and longing, a story of hope and heartbreak, a story that everyone in that room could feel, even if they did not understand why. A woman near the back of the ballroom began to cry. She did not even know why she was crying. The music had reached inside her and touched something she had buried long ago. She was not the only one. All around the room, people were wiping their eyes, moved by something they could not explain. Bradley stood frozen, his smug smile long gone. His face had gone pale. He had expected the janitor to stumble through a few bars and then give up in embarrassment. He had expected to humiliate Diana and put her in her place. Instead, he was watching his entire plan fall apart. The piece built toward its climax, the music swelling with passion and intensity. Raymond's eyes remained closed, his face a mask of concentration and emotion. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His fingers moved so fast they were almost a blur. And then came the most difficult section of the entire piece. A series of passages so technically demanding that even the greatest pianists in history had struggled with them. This was where most performers stumbled. This was where mistakes were made. The crowd held its breath. Raymond did not stumble. He did not make a single mistake. His fingers danced through the impossible passages like they were nothing. Like he had played them 1,000 times before. Like the music was not coming from his hands at all, but from somewhere deep inside his soul. Diana watched him through tears. She did not even know she was crying. She thought about all the nights she had listened to him play from her office, not knowing who he was or what he had been through. She thought about her mother and how much she would have loved to hear this. She thought about all the years she had spent building walls around her heart, pretending she did not need anyone. And she realized, in that moment, that she had been wrong about everything. The piece moved into its final section. The music became soft again, reflective, like the end of a long journey. Raymond played with such tenderness that it felt like a prayer. Each note hung in the air, beautiful and fragile, before fading into silence. And then, finally, it was over. Raymond played the last chord and let it ring out across the ballroom. The sound faded slowly, like the last light of sunset disappearing below the horizon. For 3 full seconds, there was complete silence. And then the room exploded. The applause was deafening. People were standing, cheering, wiping tears from their faces. The professional pianist who had been hired for the evening was clapping harder than anyone, shaking his head in disbelief. He had spent 30 years performing on the world's greatest stages, and he had never heard anything like what he had just witnessed. Raymond sat at the piano, overwhelmed. He had not expected this. He had not expected any of this. He had spent 15 years believing that his gift was gone, that the music had died along with his dreams. But it had been there all along, waiting for him to find the courage to let it out. Diana pushed through the crowd toward the stage. People stepped aside to let her pass, still buzzing with excitement from what they had just seen. She climbed the steps and walked to where Raymond was sitting. Their eyes met. Diana's face was wet with tears. Her carefully constructed mask had crumbled completely. She looked vulnerable in a way that no one at Sterling Industries had ever seen her look before. "Where have you been hiding?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raymond looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time, he saw past the expensive gown and the powerful title. He saw the lonely girl who had lost her mother. He saw the woman who had spent years pretending to be strong because she was afraid of being hurt. He saw someone who was just like him. "I was not hiding," he said quietly. "I have been here every night. You just never saw me." Diana felt those words hit her like a punch to the chest. Because he was right. She had walked past him 100 times without ever really seeing him. She had been so focused on her own world, her own problems, her own walls, that she had missed the extraordinary person who had been right in front of her all along. "I see you now," she said, behind them. Bradley stood at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with anger and humiliation. His plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of embarrassing the janitor, he had turned him into the hero of the evening. Instead of putting Diana in her place, he had pushed her further away than ever. He stormed toward the stage, shoving people aside. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "This proves nothing. So the man can play piano. That does not change who he is." He is a janitor, a nobody. You cannot seriously be considering Bradley. Diana's voice was calm and cold. Stop talking. He stared at her, shocked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not in his entire privileged life. I made you a promise tonight, Diana continued, turning to face him. I said that if he could play the piece perfectly, I would call off our engagement. And he did. So I am. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You cannot be serious, Bradley sputtered. Over a janitor? Do you have any idea how this will look? Your reputation. I do not care about my reputation, Diana said. I have spent my entire life caring about what other people think. I am done. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger. It was enormous, a diamond that probably cost more than most people made in a year. She held it out to Bradley. Take it, she said. We are finished. Bradley's face went red with rage. For a moment, it looked like he might explode. But then he saw the cameras. He saw the phones recording everything. He saw the most important people in New York watching him like he was a bug under a microscope. He snatched the ring from her hand. You will regret this, he hissed. Both of you. Then he turned and stormed out of the ballroom, pushing past the stunned guests. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the mocking silence from before. This was the silence of people who had just witnessed something incredible. Something they would talk about for years. Diana turned back to Raymond. He was still sitting at the piano, looking at her with an expression of complete disbelief. Why did you do that? He asked. You barely know me. Diana smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from her in years. Because you reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago, she said. You reminded me that I still have a heart. Raymond did not know what to say. So he did the only thing that made sense. He turned back to the piano and began to play again. This time, it was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the piece his mother loved. The piece Diana's mother loved too. And Diana stood beside the piano, tears streaming down her face, feeling something she had not felt in 20 years. Hope. The morning after the gala, Raymond woke up in his small Brooklyn apartment and wondered if it had all been a dream. But then his phone started ringing. And it did not stop. Somehow, videos from the gala had made their way onto the internet. Someone had recorded his entire performance and posted it online. Within hours, it had been viewed over 1 million times. By the end of the week, that number had grown to 50 million. The headlines were everywhere. Janitor stuns billionaires with stunning piano performance. CEO calls off engagement after cleaning man plays. Chopin, the most incredible talent discovery of the year. Reporters camped outside his apartment building. His phone rang so many times that he finally had to turn it off. Old friends he had not spoken to in years suddenly reached out. Music producers and talent agents left messages begging him to call them back. Raymond did not know how to handle any of it. For 15 years, he had lived in the shadows. He had become comfortable with being invisible. And now, suddenly, the whole world wanted to see him. But through all the chaos, there was one person who helped him stay grounded. Diana. She called him the day after the gala. Not to talk about business or publicity or any of the madness swirling around them. She just wanted to make sure he was okay. I know this must be overwhelming, she said. I just wanted you to know that you do not have to face it alone. Those words meant more to Raymond than she could possibly understand. Over the following weeks, they began to spend time together. Not as a CEO and a janitor. Not as a billionaire and a cleaning man. Just as two people who had found something unexpected in each other. They would meet for coffee at a small cafe far from Manhattan, where nobody recognized them. They would walk through Central Park in the early morning, before the crowds arrived. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. About music and loss. About dreams and disappointments. About the walls they had built and the courage it took to let them down. Diana learned about Raymond's years at music school. She learned about the accident that took his mother and shattered his dreams. She learned about the long, dark years when he could not bring himself to touch a piano because the pain was too great. Raymond learned about Diana's childhood. He learned about her mother, the piano teacher who played Chopin every Sunday evening. He learned about the cancer that stole her away and the father who sold the piano because he could not bear to look at it. He learned about the walls Diana had built to protect herself from ever feeling that kind of pain again. They were so different in so many ways. She ran a billion-dollar company. He cleaned office buildings for a living. She wore designer clothes and attended galas with celebrities. He owned 3 pairs of jeans and could not remember the last time he had taken a vacation. But beneath all those differences, they were exactly the same. 2 broken people who had lost their mothers too soon. 2 lonely souls who had forgotten how to let anyone in. 2 hearts that had been frozen for so long they had almost forgotten how to feel. Being together changed them both. Diana started to soften. The ice queen that everyone feared began to thaw. She smiled more. She laughed more. She started leaving the office at reasonable hours instead of working until midnight every night. Her employees noticed the change and whispered about it in the break room. They did not know what had happened, but whatever it was, they were grateful for it. Raymond started to believe in himself again. For so long, he had defined himself by his failures. The scholarship he lost. The career he never had. The dreams that died on a rainy November night. But Diana saw something different when she looked at him. She saw the talent that had never gone away. She saw the strength it took to keep going when everything fell apart. She saw a man worth believing in. 3 months after the gala, Diana made Raymond an offer. She wanted to fund his return to music school. She wanted to pay for lessons with the best teachers in the world. She wanted to give him everything he needed to rebuild the career that had been stolen from him. Raymond's first instinct was to say no. It felt like charity. It felt like he was taking advantage of her wealth. It felt like everything people had accused him of since the gala went viral. But Diana would not let him refuse. "This is not charity," she told him. "This is an investment. I have spent my entire career investing in things I believe in. And I believe in you." So Raymond said yes. He enrolled in a prestigious music program. He practiced 8 hours a day, just like he had when he was young. His fingers, which had spent years gripping mop handles instead of piano keys, slowly regained their former strength and speed. His teachers were amazed at how quickly he progressed. Within a year, he was performing again. His comeback recital was held at Carnegie Hall. It was a sold-out event. Critics and music lovers from around the world came to see the Janitor, who had captured the world's attention with a single viral video. Raymond was terrified. This was the stage he had dreamed of playing on his entire life. This was the moment that had been stolen from him 15 years ago. And now, finally, he was here. He walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The lights were blinding. The audience was just a sea of shadows beyond the edge of the stage. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. But then he looked at the front row. Diana was sitting there, watching him with tears already forming in her eyes. She was wearing a simple blue dress, not the designer gown she usually wore to events like this. She looked beautiful. She looked proud. She looked like she believed in him more than anyone had ever believed in him before. Raymond sat down at the piano. He adjusted the bench. He placed his fingers on the keys. And then he spoke into the microphone. "I would like to dedicate this performance to 2 women," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To my mother, who gave me the gift of music, and to Diana, who gave me the courage to share it with the world again." The audience was silent. Diana pressed her hand to her heart, tears streaming down her face. Raymond began to play. He played for 2 hours that night. He played Chopin and Beethoven and Rachmaninoff. He played pieces that made people laugh and pieces that made people cry. He played with all the pain and joy and hope and love that had been building inside him for 15 years. When he finished, the audience rose to their feet. The standing ovation lasted almost 10 minutes, but Raymond barely noticed. He was looking at Diana, who was clapping and crying and smiling all at the same time. And he knew, in that moment, that this was just the beginning. They got married the following spring. It was a small ceremony. Nothing like the extravagant society wedding that Diana had once planned with Bradley. Just close friends and family, gathered in a garden outside the city. The flowers were simple. The decorations were modest. But it was perfect. When Diana walked down the aisle, Raymond was sitting at a piano near the altar. He played Chopin's Ballade No. 1 as she approached. The piece their mothers had both loved. The piece that had brought them together. There was not a dry eye in the garden. After the ceremony, a reporter managed to get close enough to ask Raymond a question. How did a janitor end up married to a billionaire CEO? The reporter asked, shoving a microphone in his face. Raymond just smiled. I was never just a janitor, he said. I was a pianist who happened to clean floors for a while. There's a difference. Diana was the first person who understood that. Diana stepped up beside him and took his hand. He did not play his way into my heart, she added. He reminded me that I still had one. The reporter looked confused, but Raymond and Diana just laughed. Some things were too precious to explain to strangers. That night, at their small reception, Raymond played piano for their guests. Diana sat in the front row, just like she had at Carnegie Hall, just like she would for the rest of their lives. And somewhere, somehow, 2 mothers who had loved Chopin were watching, smiling, finally at peace, because their children had found each other and they had found their way home.